Joining me now, Director of the Center for Homeland Security and Immigration at America First Policy Institute, John Zadrozny. John, how frightened should the American people and really the world be right now at the fact there's tens of thousands of unvetted refugees being unleashed on all of us?
Thank you, Natalie, for having me on. The short answer is they should be very, very concerned. The reality is we know that literally tens of thousands of foreign nationals who were not vetted were stuffed onto military planes and evacuated out of the chaotic scene in Kabul within the last few weeks. To the extent that there was any vetting done, it's either people who were determined to actually be U.S. citizens, legal permanent residents, or possibly the special immigrant visa category holders. But anyone who was just there and was saying, I need help, was put on those planes, and they are at those bases. I heard Senator Blumenthal before talking about how wonderful this was. I wonder if any of those bases is in Connecticut right now. And for what it's worth, there are probably people who are in need of humanitarian assistance, legitimately safe people who want to be here. But I think something the left always forgets is that immigration is not about the rest of the world. It's about the United States. We've always had a tradition of accepting refugees who are in need. But at the end of the day, immigration has to make sure it serves this country. If Americans are put in danger, that's a failure on the part of this administration.
They're not putting America first. We're talking about refugees providing housing, and yet they won't even get Americans back to their own homes that are still abandoned there. And this isn't about 50,000. It's not going to stop at 50,000. This is going to be like chain migration. We're probably going to see hundreds of thousands of people coming to our country and perhaps millions around the world.
Natalie, you're correct. Make no mistake, what you're seeing from the collapse in Afghanistan and what you're seeing at our southern border, none of this is an accident. People use the word crisis. I think it's important to emphasize it's a manufactured crisis designed to fuel an amnesty that's going to help the left. It turns out, Natalie, when you spend 50 million years aborting Americans in the womb, you're short about 60 million voters. And even though the left is loud and shrill and they're in your face, I think they know behind closed doors they've got a demographic crisis on their hands. And when you can't convince Americans to vote for your Marxism, what do? You go find new voters. So this is a perfect scenario where they get to take advantage of the moment. And I couldn't help but notice Secretary Mayorkas made a comment along the lines of, this is part of the final solution or ultimate solution, or I don't remember his exact wording. What he's probably really talking about is the millions more people they're going to let in from poor corners of the world before they pass their amnesty, or try to at least.
The instability that's going to be caused by this, the incompetence, as President Trump often says, on the border, they really just don't know what they're doing at this point. Perhaps in the past, we talked about them expanding their voter base, but it's almost a Pandora's box where they don't even realize what they've unleashed, because they already get 2 million people this year coming from the border. Now you have the refugee crisis happening. This is going to be a lot worse than the refugee crisis we saw totally devastate Europe back in 2015.
I think you're correct, Natalie, about the Pandora's box aspect of this. I mean, I think they can control it, but they'll find out soon enough that's not the case. And there's one other thing I'd like to point out about the population that's coming over. The unvetted population will contain everyone that Al-Qaeda / the Taliban would have killed. So that includes criminals, drug users, rapists. In fact, Afghanistan has a cultural issue where they have a real problem with child rape because of certain other cultural factors. They're all on those planes because they're not waiting around for the Taliban to execute them when they visit a town near them. And this is all, unfortunately, we're going to see the fallout from this. If you want to know why Europe has been cold about accepting a lot of the Afghan refugees, it's because they dealt with this 4 or 5 years ago and they're done. So I think it's unfortunate that we're going to see a lot of pain in the coming weeks. But I think we just need to make sure that we keep a focus on it and call out the administration when there are problems, because it's their fault.
Do you think there's anything states or even local organizations can do at this point? Because you just feel like you're sitting here waiting for it to happen. We know it's going to happen. It feels inevitable. But can't we be more proactive and not be reactionary and wait until the terrorist attacks start up again? Isn't there anything that we can do?
There's quite a bit that states and localities can do. And one thing I would encourage state governments and local governments and just citizens to do is start taking a harder look at these refugee resettlement organizations. Natalie, there's this perception that these are humanitarian, altruistic organizations that care about humanity. From working on this issue, I can tell you that that's bunk. They make a pretty nice price per capita for the number of refugees they bring into the country. Many of these groups were illegally lobbying the federal government to make the number as high as possible, knowing full well that they would be beneficiaries of it. And they make a lot of money off of this. Oh, and by the way, Natalie, A lot of this refugee resettlement happens in communities where there are abusive employers, like Tyson's Chicken in Amarillo. They were only too happy to have poor refugees because it turns out when you come from a third world dictatorship, when your boss tells you to work another 10 hours, you don't say no. So we have a lot of questions about this population. And I think states and localities, they have responsibility for law enforcement, for the security of their citizens. They have an independent constitutional obligation to their people. And I hope governments stand up and do what's right in the coming weeks and months.
Isn't it so nice that we're getting to see the Bushes and the Clintons and the Obamas? They've started a nonprofit. They're going to help resettle all these refugees. It's just the establishment. They like to look like the big humanitarians, but the fact is it's the people that are going to really suffer this. And it's so sad, the American people and really the people around the world in any of these communities, because they get their protection, the elites do, so-called elites, but the people are going to have to bear the brunt of it. And it's really sad. John, thank you for the work you're doing to expose this. And I know we'll be seeing you soon because this crisis is just growing.
Thank you, Natalie.
God bless you.